My request for approval was promptly denied. It would be fine if it's the storage shed. I exclaimed, "Don't make a fool of me. Our house is fairly spacious. If the rooms were tidied up, there would be no problem having my father live with us. Truly, my husband's feelings for me and my family are less than that of a pet. Well then, I will sincerely clean up the storage shed and renovate it. Even the storage shed can be used just like a regular room if it's clean. There's meaning in living with my father now," I determined. Aaron, however, seemed unenthusiastic. "There's no way I'm doing such a thing. Why do I have to renovate for your father?" I recalled the major renovation we did to ensure my mother-in-law, who visits sometimes, would not have trouble staying over. We even installed a bathroom and toilet, similar to a hotel. I won't rely on such a demon-like man anymore. I made a decision. My name is Vivian Westhill, 52 years old. I help with the company my husband runs. My son, Matthew, has left home, and it's just the two of us living together. My mother-in-law sometimes comes over, but since her house is nearby, she doesn't live with us. Reflecting on how I met my husband nearly 30 years ago, I shared, I hate to say it myself, but I was famous for being good-looking in my hometown. My mother passed away in a traffic accident when I was in middle school, and I was helping each other out with my father. Although I was invited out by many men, they were nothing but a hindrance to me. I had a dream of becoming an accountant and was working hard towards that. Despite my popularity, I had a boyfriend of the same age. We would secretly call each other and go out to eat after part-time. I had no intention of dating anyone else. The only people I could let my guard down with were him and my father. He alone appreciated not my appearance, but my seriousness and true strength, among other aspects of my personality and way of thinking. I think we would have become a couple even if I wasn't the same appearance. That was the kind of relationship we had. However, everything changed one day when I returned home to find an unfamiliar family of 3 in my house. Seeing me, my father made a troubled face. I must have been more surprised. A known family introduced themselves. "We are the West Hills." Hearing the name West Hill made it click. A famous rich family in town. I wondered why they were in my house. "Welcome home, Vivian. Mr. West Hill here wants to take you as his wife." Shocked, I protested. "A wife? Marriage? What are you talking about? I had never seen these 3 before. Everyone knows they hold significant influence in town as a wealthy family. Yet the talk of me becoming a bride was unbelievable. Nice to meet you, Vivian. Our Aaron has fallen for you at first sight. He insists on having you as his wife." My would-be father-in-law began speaking. Despite feeling unreal, they didn't disappear, and I was told, "Take your time and talk it over with your father. We'll come back in a week to hear your answer." As they left, I pondered, could our fate be decided in just a week? It didn't seem real. I thought things like this only happened in dramas, and I couldn't believe it was happening to me. Stunned, I watched as the 3 of them left. "Dad, what's this about a debt? What's your relation with those people?" My father turned to me with a pale face, drained of all blood. "Vivian, I'm sorry. It's true. I was lonely and started drinking and gambling. Before I knew it, the money was gone, and I began borrowing to cover it. Everything I heard since coming home was beyond my capacity to accept." "Debts? Why didn't you tell me? I understand you were lonely after Mom suddenly passed away, but having a debt." I couldn't think calmly, naturally. I couldn't even talk about it calmly. This was indeed out of the blue. As far as I could remember, my father never got drunk or angry from losing at gambling. I didn't even know. Mr. Westhill invited me and introduced me to a place with Mr. Westhill's face. We could drink on a tab, and I didn't even know how much the bill was accumulating. The same thing with gambling. He let me buy lottery tickets together, and it just piled up. My father is truly a good person, not knowing how to doubt people. It must have been easy for someone like a scam artist. They must have been scheming from the start to trap my father and have their way with me. Interrupting my thoughts, I questioned, "Hold on a second. What happens to you if I don't marry their son?" In desperation, I pondered if there was any alternative. The looming threat of being pursued by debt collectors or sent to a work camp left me trembling. I clung to a shred of hope, suggesting, "There's no such thing as work camps these days. Can't you just keep working hard to pay it off?" My father's response was disheartening. "Sorry, Vivian, that's impossible. Debt collectors might start contacting my workplace. I might not be able to work anymore." Feeling completely cornered and with no more options to explore, I decided it was enough. There was nothing more to discuss. Despite wanting to vent my feelings of frustration, humiliation, and anger, I couldn't bring myself to do that to my father, who had always taken care of me. I packed my bags and made the immediate decision to go to the West Hill family. There was no use worrying about it. Making this decision wasn't easy, but considering the increasing interest on the debt, I couldn't cling to my home any longer. Marrying Aaron seemed to be the only way to resolve this, and before I could change my mind, I quietly left the house. That night, I arrived at the West Hills home and boldly knocked on the front door. "You're early. Seems like you're blinded by money, just like everyone else," Aaron remarked. Frustration boiled within me, and I wanted to scream that I didn't want any money and wasn't unhappy because I was poor. But his words treated me like a possession, objectifying and disgusting. Leaving everything behind, I looked forward to being with him from now on, offering a forced greeting as I entered the West Hill household. After that, everything progressed in a whirlwind. Betrayed by my trusted father and breaking up with my beloved boyfriend, it felt like all my emotions had disappeared. The grand wedding with a local famous person, attended by many, blurred in my memory. The only vivid image was my father's haggard look, erasing my resentment towards him. Accepting this as my fate, I decided to change my outlook and enjoy my married life. Little did I know, that was just the beginning of a harrowing experience. Responsibilities piled up, from housework to assisting with the family business, and the pressure to have children took a toll on my mental state. My mother-in-law constantly nagged, and my husband's initial kindness turned into indifference. It was far from the sweet married life I had imagined. "You're completely useless. A woman from the club would be better. Just quietly do your job and chores," my husband declared, treating me like a housemaid. When I became pregnant, even severe morning sickness didn't evoke sympathy. "You're getting fat. Just do your chores and work properly. I don't know why I married you." I gave up on being acknowledged in this home. A wife from a poor family would never be seen as more than a servant. Frustrating as it was, for the sake of my unborn child, I had to endure. Eventually, I gave birth to a boy, but my husband, now with an heir, hardly ever came home. When he did, he reeked of strong perfume and alcohol, evidence of his time spent at clubs. However, my primary focus was on raising my child, so my husband's absence brought a sense of relief. Matthew, my son, grew up healthy and was easy to raise, despite my mother-in-law's persistent annoyance, claiming that Aaron would have been a better choice. I preferred Matthew not turning into a worthless man. My kind-hearted son aspired to become a doctor, and when he left for university, I felt a void in my heart. To fill that emptiness, I decided to dedicate myself more to my work. Around that time, my father-in-law, who had treated me as a human being, passed away. My mother-in-law moved to a condo near the downtown area, enjoying the inheritance from my father-in-law. With the loss of the person who had supported and cared for me like my own father, I began to miss my father. Taking advantage of my husband's indifference, I started talking to my father again, just like old times. Though it was challenging to speak without making my father feel guilty, one day he looked serious. When I asked what was wrong, he said in a resigned tone that he was diagnosed with malignant lymphoma and had only 6 months to live. I was utterly shocked and couldn't believe it. "No way, Dad, that can't be. You're so lively. It's impossible that you only have half a year left, just when we could finally be like a father and daughter again. I can't bear the thought of never seeing you again." Despite my emotional plea, my father smiled kindly and nodded. Wanting to ensure he wouldn't be alone, I decided to ask my husband to let him live with us in our spacious home. I'm not ready to give up, but at least I don't want him to be alone. My father expressed happiness hearing those words and left with a gentle smile. For the first time since getting married, I decided to confront my husband that night. As usual, he came home drunk with the smell of perfume. Seeing me awake and waiting for him, he looked startled. "What's the matter? Don't tell me you want some affection." It seemed he hadn't changed his view on women being objects. I looked straight at him and said, "Aaron, I have something important to talk about. My father has been diagnosed with terminal cancer and has only 6 months to live. I want him to live with us in this house. Of course, I won't let it be a bother to you. We can just use one of the vacant rooms in the house. That's okay, right? You will listen to such a request, won't you?" Since my husband was hardly at home, there should have been no reason to object. I took it for granted that he would agree. But the unexpected reply was, "Just leave that half-dead old man alone. I'm not going to let someone like that into the house. It'll ruin the atmosphere." "Absolutely not. If you want to do that, you can leave. I have no intention of living with a sick person." My request was flatly denied, and I felt like I had fallen into a gaping hole in the ground. In my heart, I screamed, "If you want, the shed is fine. Don't mock me. Our house is quite large, and there is no problem if my father moves in. After cleaning up a room, we can live without facing each other. My husband really holds feelings for me and my family that are less than that for a pet. Well then, I will seriously clean and renovate the storage shed. If the storage shed is cleaned, it can be used just like a normal room. There is meaning in living with my father now." However, my husband remained adamant, saying, "There's no way I'm doing such a thing. Why do I have to renovate for your father?" Recalling the major renovation I did for my mother-in-law, I decided not to rely on such a demon-like man anymore. Since then, I worked more than ever and visited my father when I had the time. Some days he seemed to be doing well, and other days he seemed to be doing badly. I couldn't feel alive every day unless I saw my father's face. I was only praying for my father's illness to be cured. Miraculously, my prayers seemed to be heard, as my father was still alive after 6 months. A bright light seemed to shine, and I started to live positively, little by little. About half a year after my father's confession, my husband came back with a pale face. I sensed that something serious had happened because he had never come back early since we got married. "Sit down. I have important news. I was told that I have cancer, and my life expectancy is short." Come to think of it, my husband had been looking pale lately. I thought it was due to drinking too much alcohol or lack of sleep. Strangely, I was not shocked. It was completely someone else's problem. Besides, everyone should take care of themselves. You were like, "Leave that half-dead man alone," right? I'll do just as you said. If you want me to leave, I'm leaving. Oh yes, I found a lawyer for our divorce matters. I left the room without looking back. I decided to leave suddenly, but I did not regret it at all. You don't have a penny, do you? Where do you think you're going, leaving this house? You won't be able to live a luxurious life like you have been. You have been living on everything I have worked hard for, you inhuman. Does he still think that I have been living in this house for money? I had been subjected to brainwashing through my mother-in-law and endured verbal abuse from my husband, believing that I needed to stay and protect this house. However, since learning about my father's terminal diagnosis 6 months ago, I woke up to the realization that I couldn't continue living like this. During this time, I mentally prepared myself for divorce, ready to leave the house at any moment. My husband continued to shout something in the background, but it no longer concerned me. I never aspired for a luxurious life. All I needed was the ability to eat 3 meals a day and a place to sleep. I returned to my room, packed only the essentials into my suitcase, and left the house. Whether my husband faced trouble or not, it didn't matter to me. I promptly sent the email I had drafted, resigning from my position to the company's president. I aimed to settle everything related to my husband and the West Hill family, which I had been supporting for nearly 30 years. In fact, since discussing my father's situation half a year ago, I had been in contact with a divorce specialist lawyer recommended by the company's advisory lawyer. I shared everything about our marriage, starting from events before our marriage. The lawyer listened quietly, nodding in understanding. When I mentioned that I had been working for the family business without pay, the lawyer was genuinely surprised. It would amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid salary. After finishing my story, he immediately commented that the divorce should be straightforward. I had also gathered evidence of my husband's faults, including photos of emails from other women and notes documenting serious moral harassment. Additionally, I had recorded his verbally abusive remarks on my smartphone. While that evidence was sufficient, the lawyer also provided photos of my husband's infidelity for free. He assured me that everything would go well, even if I didn't take further action. He urged me to feel like I was on a big ship and didn't need to answer the angry calls from my husband, as he would handle everything. I walked with a smile, naturally ignoring the angry calls. Amidst the calls from my husband, there were also calls from my mother-in-law, likely questioning if I planned to abandon everything when my son was in trouble. If her son was in trouble, she should take care of him herself. Although a luxurious room resembling a show home awaited her return to that house, she seemed panicked. The company started by my father-in-law was falling apart without me, who had been a crucial support. The president, who was more of a decoration due to ESS, couldn't steer the company effectively, and things were not going well. Some colleagues had reached out, asking me to come back, but I had no intention of dedicating myself to the company any longer. Despite its local significance, the number of clients would steadily decrease. While I felt sorry for letting my father-in-law's hard-earned company decline, I believed that if my husband and mother-in-law had worked as diligently as him, this wouldn't have happened. My decision to quit might have been different, and my son Matthew might have considered taking over the family business. Furthermore, my husband not only contributed little to the company, but also seemed to constantly engage in inappropriate behavior with female employees, leading to suspicions and resignations. It appears that those women are planning to sue the company for sexual harassment. Now, my husband has to handle the repercussions of the mess he created in his life, and it seems that justice is catching up with him. I desired justice for my husband and mother-in-law, wanting them to face proper consequences so that those who had worked honestly wouldn't be made to look foolish. To add to the turmoil, the company faced accusations of tax evasion by the IRS, discovered accidentally while my lawyer was investigating. Further examination revealed questionable points in the accounts, raising suspicions of my husband's embezzlement. Looking back, it was odd that he had substantial money at his disposal, considering his salary. While assisting with the accounting, I had been indifferent to my husband's financial activities, not realizing the disparity between his income and expenditures. If I had questioned where the excess funds were coming from, I would have understood the truth. In reality, he'd have been squandering the company's money, including my salary that he had transferred to his own account. Kickbacks for orders, bribes for personal gain, tax evasion, and special embezzlement. My husband's crimes were diverse. I couldn't predict whether the court's judgment or his life expectancy would come first, but I desired him to atone for as much as possible. 6 months ago, I began scrutinizing the books, copying them to preserve evidence, and submitting them to the IRS. My prior study to become an accountant proved beneficial in this endeavor. To bridge the financial gap, my husband sold the company to a major corporation and hastily disposed of the large mansion at a bargain. My mother-in-law also sold her condo to meet the IRS obligations and pay me. Now they live together in a small apartment complex, and rumors suggest my husband has several children from affairs, necessitating child support payments. Despite his age, my husband seems to have life insurance, but its adequacy is uncertain. My mother-in-law, previously condescending, now works to cover her son's medical and living expenses. The parent and child should reflect on their actions until the end. Receiving a substantial amount, I purchased a condo in a convenient location. I reunited with my father, who is now recovering, thanks to Matthew's introduction to a renowned doctor. My father had been living with Matthew, saving money for me to free me from financial burdens. Matthew, considering my father more respectable than his own, agreed to my request. Living together until the condo was secured, I chose a place close to Matthew's home. I started working at the law firm that aided me, contributing to corporate cases. Despite not being an accountant, my experience is an asset, and I'm studying to acquire a tax accountant qualification. My husband is serving an actual imprisonment sentence, relieving concerns about money or sustenance. Ironically, my mother-in-law moved into a relative's house, experiencing what it's like to be in need after acting superior for so long. Seeking justice for my mistreatment, I'm astounded by the prevalence of power and sexual harassment in various transactions. I worried about potential job losses due to the company acquisition, but it seems to have worked out for most. As everything falls into place, I savor the happiness that comes from knowing I made the right choices. Returning home from work, I find my father and another man waiting. It's my ex-boyfriend, the person I truly loved. After nearly 30 years, he welcomes me back warmly. My father, who had apologized to him when I escaped from the troubled house, knew about my ex-boyfriend. The three men, including Matthew, were watching over me. Now, I plan to live with these three men whom I genuinely love from the bottom of my heart.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons. leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, "I'm moving to the sales department soon." If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. "Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it." On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. "It's still working hours." Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. "Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived." I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. "They look good." "What are you talking about?" "These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. "Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us." "The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one?" As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. "Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay?" I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. "Yes, I'm inviting my father." "That's great. I might invite my parents too." I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.